Let's talk for a minute about scopes and see what they are. So scope is, as we said, is what we are using to store our application data model, our properties, our live data. And is a special object, $scope, that refers to the application model itself. So it's something that you can access out of the box while you use Angular, and you can inject it inside your controllers. Scopes are arranged hierarchically. This is what is called prototypical inheritance. It means that if you can have nested controllers, and if you have a property inside your parent controller, you want to access that from a child controller, you can. And to do so, you can use the $parent dot notation. We'll see how to use that in the upcoming lesson. And anyway, this is something that you need to be aware of. Scopes are the intermediary between view and controllers. It's the way they communicate to each other and they know about the data. So controllers are exposing the scope data to our view. We have two ways to display our scopes inside our HTML, and one is the ng model, which is the directive we use to bind the deform controls to the model itself. So if we want, for example, to have an input and store the value for the input into a specific property, we need to use the ng model directive, and it supports two-way data binding. ngbind is something that we use instead to display the values in our model inside our view. So we can basically use the ngbind directive, and it will take an expression as input, so it can either be directly a property name in our scope, or it can be an expression like a numerical operation. We can use the ngbind directive in two ways in our code. One is to use the ng-bind keyword with a equal sign, and between single quotes we'll put our expression. Another way, which is simpler, is to use the double curly brackets notation. So it will be double curly brackets, and in between them we'll have the expression we want to evaluate. How ngModel and ngBind are used in our code? Let's see an example of what I just said. We have on the left side the script.js file, and on the right side we have the index.html. In the first row of our index.html we are declaring a controller, which is named myController, and we are using that inside our Angular application in the script.js. Second line, we are using .controller, blah blah blah, okay? And we are injecting the scope, as I mentioned earlier. In the third line of our index.html, we have declared an input type text, and we're binding that to the model username in our controller. And we can see that on the left side we have $scope.username equals word. So again, $scope is used to initialize and to store the data model for our application. We have a button that is using the ng-click directive. We'll see more about this directive later on, but keep in mind that basically binds the click event to any Angular expression. So basically whenever the click event triggers, Angular will invoke the expression that we have between single quotes, which is initializing the greeting value in our scope to be a string. It will be hello and the value that we have stored in username, so it will be hello world. And the last thing we are doing is using ngbind in its double curly brackets notation. So we have greeting on the right side, which maps to the $scope.greeting. So it will print out the hello world string. So again, we have ngModel username, which is binding the username property in script.js in our controller. So every time the value in the model changes, the view will be updated, and the other way around. This is what is called two-way data binding. So every time we type something in our input text, the ngModel will be automatically updated. And again, we're using the ngbind to just output whatever is the value of our greeting inside our HTML. So whenever username changes, also this greeting property will be updated. In the next lesson, we look a little bit closely at controllers and how to use the $parent property, and especially how to refactor a controller in order to use the controller as syntax.